From the Banner offices along the Inner Harbor, it is the Banner Ravens podcast. Paul Mancano, Jonas Shaffer live on a Wednesday in February. Jonas, I am back from spring training. I am most excited to be back in a room.
Did you get a tan?
No, I mean, do I look any more tan to you?
I don't know. I don't really look at people by their skin color, so I can't really tell.
I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Yes.
Do you tan at all?
No, I thought you burn. I burn so deeply. Yeah. I will put suntan lotion on and still burn. Look red like a tomato.
Burn, baby, burn. I do burn if I don't put sunscreen on. I made sure I put sunscreen on all week, but the problem is when you go to spring training or you go to some kind of event or you golf or something, you get a farmer's tan. You don't get the full body tan, and then you look kind of stupid. And if you're wearing a watch, you get the watch tan, which is pretty bad.
We doing the shadder?
What is always the right time?
Yeah.
Perfect timing, whatever. All right. On this podcast episode, we are going to discuss what we heard and saw at the Ravens introductory press conference for their coordinators, as Jesse Minter introduced his three coordinators over at One Winning Drive. We will talk about the coaching staff overall, which has been finalized as well. Some takeaways that we have from that group. But first off, Jonas, you were there at the press conference. You saw those four men up at the dais. What was your reaction to their fashion statements, and particularly the fashion statement of one head coach, Jesse Minter?
It's definitely a new era, Paul. John Harbaugh would never rock the blazer over hoodie look. I think I'm a little bit too in my head about this because I've been watching, as you know, I've been slacking you about Industry, one of my favorite shows on the air right now.
You love that show.
On HBO. It's given me a lot of words that I did not know, including immiserate, as I was telling you. Very fun word.
Word of the day.
Not yet. Wait until they lose week one. And I think like I'm a little bit, like Wall Street pilled just with the value of a nice suit. But I do think, you wear what you're comfortable. There is intentionality behind what he wore. I think the fact that there was enough confidence to go blazer over hoodie says something about Jesse Minter. I can't ever recall him doing something as audacious in his various, press conference obligations in LA. I think it was usually like ball cap and a Chargers hoodie or ball cap and a Chargers polo. But the fact that he had confidence to rock that, I think said something. I asked Anthony Levine, the new special teams coordinator, after about that. And he's like, yeah, man, like seeing him get up there made me feel bad about what I wore because he was rocking with some swag out there.
Yeah, I think it reminds me of the scene in Talladega Nights where they're talking about a t-shirt tuxedo t-shirt, how it's, you want to be formal, but also you're here to party. I think you want somebody who wears a hoodie underneath a blazer wants the best of both worlds. And I think it was also Jesse Minter saying like, all right, my introductory press conference, I suited up, I wore the tie, but this is their show. I'm the cool guy that just hired them, but this is their thing going on here.
Yeah, I mean, Dan Quinn has the backwards cap. Maybe he's not going to wear a blazer to every late July training camp presser, but maybe this becomes his new look.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the maybe more important things that this Ravens coaching staff and what Jesse Minter is bringing in this Ravens coaching staff. You wrote a great story on thebanner.com where people can subscribe $1 for 6 months about this coaching staff as a whole and some major takeaways from it. And Jonas, one of my major takeaways off the bat was just the diverse backgrounds that a lot of these guys have. We talked about it a little bit when these hires were rolling in of Declan Doyle as offensive coordinator and Anthony Weaver as defensive coordinator. The fact that Declan Doyle has never shared a staff with Jesse Minter. The fact that Anthony Weaver has never shared a staff with Jesse Minter. Anthony Levine Sr. was a player when Jesse Minter, the special teams coordinator, obviously, was a player when Jesse Minter was on this team, but they didn't share a coaching staff as well. You have former Ravens players in Weaver and Levine, and you have non-players entirely in Doyle. You have multiple guys from the college ranks too. Outside linebackers coach Harlan Bauer, defensive line coach Lou Esposito, secondary coach Mike Mickens, assistant DB coach Miles Taylor, safeties coach PJ Volker. You have different guys from all kinds of backgrounds that I think speaks to the diversity of how wide a net Jesse Minter cast in finding these guys and how willing he is to step out of his comfort zone to assemble it.
Yeah, it was it was interesting, I think, because Childs Walker, our colleague, asked him today about just his general philosophy and putting this staff together like a puzzle. And that was an analogy that Jesse went with. He said, he wanted to get guys together so that this staff all fits together as a puzzle does. And it was interesting that he maybe kind of made a distinction between what he was looking for on offense and what he was looking for on defense. And maybe that's just because of the relative, experience disparity there with the former coordinators that you have there on offense, Joe Lombardi, Marcus Brady, versus what you have on defense, where it's a little bit more fresh-faced, but you can get away with that because he is going to be the play caller, because he does have this defensive genius that made him, such an exceptional coaching candidate. He said he's really looking for teachers, connectors, fundamentalists, and how they'll teach the guys how to play defense. By the way, do not know if fundamentalist is a word now that we can adopt to our football lexicon. For me, it's always been associated with something else in the more socio-political space. But I think it was interesting that was what he used. That was the wording that he used to describe his priorities on defense. Whereas maybe on offense, it's a little bit more of, I don't know, obviously he highlighted Declan Doyle as being a connector and someone who could reach guys and teach guys. But I just thought it was curious that because of all these college influences that are coming up from the Power 5 level, the Group of 5 level, that he said specifically he's looking for teachers, connectors, fundamentalists. Maybe that is just reflective of he didn't think the defense was all that tight last year. He didn't think it was all that well coached, and there is more room for them to cover going from 2025 to 2026 than the offense. Maybe it's reflective of the attrition perhaps that he expects to lose, that he expects this team to suffer in this offseason. But I did kind of fixate on that as he answered Childs' question.
Yeah, maybe it kind of just shows his slight bias towards defense as well.
Right.
That's the area where he knows the most fundamentals, I think you could say.
Yeah.
And the offense, is just a little bit out of his hemisphere. And we'll talk about when it comes to Declan Doyle, just how much kind of his own stamp he will be able to put on that offense because he has a defensive-minded head coach. Some other takeaways from the coaching staff as a whole that you took, Jonas, the connective tissue between a lot of these guys. Obviously, the three coordinators, as mentioned, haven't shared staffs with Jesse Minter, and I think that shows that Jesse Minter wasn't just coming in and saying, I'm going to hire all my buddies. I think that's a good thing. But at the same time, they weren't averse to hiring guys who knew each other, of saying, hey, I've coached with this guy in the past. I like how he does things. Let's bring him in. We speak the same language. We're on the same page when it comes to the kind of defense or offense that we want to run. You think of Declan Doyle has worked with senior offensive assistant Joe Lombardi, who was the offensive coordinator last year with the Broncos, as well as new tight ends coach Zach Rossi on that Broncos staff in 2023, 2024. Marcus Brady worked with Jesse Minter on the Chargers staff the past 2 years. Outside linebackers coach Harlan Bauer worked with inside linebackers coach Tyler Santucci at Texas A&M in 2021 and Duke in 2023. So there are a lot of connective tissues between the guys on this staff too.
And not just the guys on the staff, but a couple of the guys on the roster, like Mike Mickens. We don't know how much hands-on time he got with Kyle Hamilton at Notre Dame, but he was coaching up the aspects of the Notre Dame secondary when Kyle Hamilton was there. Lou Esposito, when he was at Western Michigan, coached Bilal Kone. So there is that level of security. And I imagine that, I think would probably be the expectation that if you have guys on the roster who've worked with these coaches in the past, then you call them up and ask them, hey, is this guy just a pretty face in the interview, or does he actually know his stuff? Does he actually care about you as a player, as a person? So I think having that level, that second level of verification as you go through the coaching process and you try to figure out which guys work best, who's genuine, who's an actually good teacher, who's innovative and introspective in how they approach this job. I think that's important. So obviously, we could be sitting here a year from now and talking about a defensive staff that is 75% new because Jesse Minter just didn't like how they worked, how they fit together. But I think this does give you some indication of what he values in terms of putting together a staff. There aren't a lot of siloed coaches in this first year coaching model that he's put together.
Yeah. And then obviously one of perhaps the biggest hire on Jesse Minter's staff was Declan Doyle as the offensive coordinator. And it was an outside the box hire in some ways because he is young. He's 29 years old and he has never called plays before at the NFL level, coming from Ben Johnson's coaching staff, where Ben Johnson was the man in charge there, Declan Doyle was seen as a rising candidate in the head coaching offensive coordinator field, but was certainly you're taking a little bit of a risk by taking somebody who hasn't had that kind of experience. Jesse Minter, though, made it clear that he liked Declan Doyle because he appreciated the whole system in Chicago under Ben Johnson. And maybe there are some similarities there with this type of style that they're going to run. Caleb Williams obviously is a dual threat quarterback who has immense talent, much like Lamar Jackson. The run game in particular for Chicago took massive steps forward under Ben Johnson. That is going to be a massive point of emphasis as well in this Ravens team. What did you make of that kind of explanation for why Jesse Minter hired Declan Doyle?
Yeah, I thought back to just the other coaches who were on that reported shortlist for this OC position. You think of Davis Webb potentially being in the mix there before, who knows what would have come of that, but with Sean Payton firing Joe Lombardi and clearing a path for Davis Webb to not just get promoted, but perhaps usurp Sean Payton's role as play caller. Sean Payton, I think, looms large over Declan Doyle's career, and the fact that he was successful in New Orleans with Drew Brees, even as he was falling off, arm strength wise there. That he was able to come in to Denver with Bo Nix, not a lot of skill talent, and get that offense back to respectability. I think reflects well on that system. And if it was a system that, if it's a system that was kind of motivating Jesse in terms of what he was looking for, then it would make sense that he would look to Denver. It would make sense that he would look to Detroit. He brought in Scotty Montgomery as another candidate coming from that line system. Obviously, Declan Doyle worked with Ben Johnson as well in New Orleans, so there's that connective tissue there. And then maybe a little bit more of a, kind of not serious candidate, because we never really heard much smoke about Cliff Kingsbury after that initial interview, but he was reportedly in the mix for the offensive coordinator, and I don't think that Commander system last year was that well regarded. And I think the fact that Cliff's offenses have tended to degrade over the years would maybe have made that system a little less attractive than the sustainability of the Denver system or the Lions system or the Brown system. But it was interesting that if we are thinking of this through the prism of what are the systems that Jesse Minter was attracted to as he was kind of putting together his preliminary list, not this offseason, but last offseason, considering what the Commanders did in 2024, certainly I could see the appeal of wondering what exactly was the secret sauce that Cliff Kingsbury brought to it to get Jaden Daniels, launch him into superstar status as a rookie.
Right. In terms of what we heard at the press conference today, heard a lot from the coordinators, and we'll get into those. Let's start with Jesse Minter, though, and what he said, because he may have dropped a little bit of a breadcrumb as to the kind of team he wants to put together, the kind of values that he wants to instill in Baltimore. We hear the phrase, play like a Raven. It's one of those phrases you can just slap on everything and apply to everything. There's no specific definition. They will throw out all the platitudes, playing tough, playing together, all that kind of stuff. Jesse Minter was talking about Anthony Weaver, and he was talking about how it's great that he has the experience of being in the building, much like Minter himself, of knowing what it's like to play like a Raven. He said, quote, "There's so many great qualities of him," being Weaver, knowing the surroundings, knowing what it means to be a Raven, knowing how we're kind of trying to rebrand that a little bit and make it a new age to play like a Raven, end quote. Jonas, it's not just the hoodie under the blazer. Jesse Minter wants to change some things in Baltimore. What did you make of that?
I didn't really know what to make of it, just the new ageness of it all, because football is football and it's been played the same way basically since since Lambeau was coaching up a storm in Green Bay.
Since Teddy Roosevelt changed instilled the line of scrimmage.
Since the forward pass was implemented.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, the level of sophistication and the level of analytics and the speed of the game and of the players has approached. But at the same time, like you hear any smart offensive coordinator worth his salt, like, there are only so many ways that you can move guys on a field. There are only so many ways that you can play a coverage. And so playing like a Raven, it is one of those things that is self-evident. Like, someone who plays like a Raven just by watching them. So I don't really know what new wave, new era, playing like a Raven will mean. I don't know if that means off the field conduct. I don't know if that means on the field conduct. I don't know if it means being more sensitive to the Gen Z athletes that are coming through the ranks. I don't know if it's making space for these guys to do podcasts or to have social media. It's, obviously play probably undercut some of those theories, but I'd be curious to check in with Jesse as we go through these next couple of weeks, next couple of months, and get closer to kickoff in week one, what exactly he's landed on and how he feels like that distinguishes itself from when he was here last in 2020.
Yeah, play like a Raven. Giannahan has written a series of stories. Eat like a Raven. We now have dress like a Raven with the hoodie under the blazer. I'm interested to see podcast like a Raven is perhaps the next one. This kind of reminds me of what you were talking about with there are only so many ways you can script up a play. There are only so many ways you can get guys open and have, a play develop. I was watching the dunk contest the other night on Valentine's night because I was alone in Sarasota. Maybe an all-time low for a Valentine's. Felt bad for my girlfriend who was not there.
Yeah, I mean, I have some entries that I can throw in the mixer to make you feel better, but we could talk about that off mic.
But a friend of the podcast, Noah Eagle, was calling that, and he made the point that at this point, we've kind of run out of dunks. There's no other way you can dunk the basketball that we have never seen before.
Right.
You can come up with new things to jump over, but
it's the opposite of AI. Like AI takes a new giant leap forward every 6 months, but basketball dunks.
Yeah,
we are the 99.9th percentile of discoverable dunks.
Yes.
In the known universe.
We've hit the ceiling there. And to a certain extent, I agree when it comes to football. Football is played differently than it was 20, 30, 40 years ago, but at the same time, it's the same game. But I think fans just want to hear that something different is happening in the building. The ownership made a decision to change coaches for a reason. They made a decision to move on from John Harbaugh for a reason, and it's because things weren't working. And this team is going to look largely the same roster-wise as it did last year. The big difference is they're going to have a new head coach with a new offensive coordinator and a new defensive coordinator and a new special teams coordinator. So I don't know exactly what Jesse Minter means by this new age of playing like a Raven, but I think it's intriguing. And I think it's a way to potentially excite not only the players, but the fan base as well. And if it means there comes with, as he said, a little bit of rebranding, I think fans want that. I think a refresh every now and again is okay. I think of Bill Belichick. Was he hugely successful in his times when he was with the Patriots? Yes. He won 6 Super Bowls, and somehow he's not a Hall of Famer after all that. He won 6 Super Bowls. He instilled this incredible organizational philosophy that lasted forever and took him through multiple iterations of a Patriots team. But when he left, they have to change things. I mean, Mike Vrabel was a pupil of his. He was a player under Bill Belichick in the same way Jesse Minter is a pupil of John Harbaugh's. But the way that Mike Vrabel runs his team is not the same as the way that Bill Belichick runs his team. It's different. And so I think it's okay for Jesse Minter to come in and say, we acknowledge and we respect all of the things that this organization has done and what John Harbaugh did here, but we're going to do things our way.
It could just be that we're wildly overthinking this.
Yeah.
What was the pull quote of all pull quotes from Jesse Minter in that introductory press conference?
Rebranding play like a Raven?
No, is his first press conference last month. It was, we're going to put these guys so that they can be at their best when their best is needed.
Yes.
So play like a Raven, to him, the packaging, I think, if they actually don't figure out what it means, could be sold as playing like a Raven means bringing your best in the playoffs.
Right.
And obviously the packaging is one thing, and whether what's actually in the box itself is still to be figured out. Because if you sell playing like a Raven means we're going to finally get to the Super Bowl, and then you don't, then playing like a Raven under Jesse Minter is going to look a lot like it did under John Harbaugh toward the end of his tenure there. So you're kind of back to square one if that is the intention of new age playing like a Raven. But if so much of what has been said from Steve Bisciotti and what Jesse said at his introductory presser was predicated on the idea that he is the guy to take the Ravens where John Harbaugh could not. And so if that's the way that they spin playing like a Raven and just focusing it on January and February, then I guess that is something that could pass muster. But to me, it doesn't really get to the issue of what this thing that he harped on a couple of times on. That's what we're talking about right now. It wasn't just a throwaway remark. Like,
right.
He talked about it several times, and kind of completely unprompted it in one case, just as a tangent on an Anthony Weaver answer. So we'll see.
Well, and speaking of Anthony Weaver, when asked about how Anthony Weaver and this coaching staff can get the best out of the Ravens defensive players in the fourth quarter in crunch time, he used what has, become a little bit of a cliche, which is in those big moments, we don't rise to the occasion. We fall back on our fundamentals. We fall back on our training. And it's a cliche for a reason, because I think it is important. So many times over the past several years, when it comes to the Ravens defense flubbing things in the fourth quarter, it feels like they are suddenly playing outside of themselves. Like maybe they're trying to do too much. Maybe they're trying to press. Maybe one guy feels like he's got to step up and make a play. Whereas look back at that Steelers game. You just play fundamental defense down the stretch, and you don't allow two back-breaking touchdowns in the final few minutes of that game. You come out of there with the win. Just play fundamental football. And when you are your most exhausted, you're most tired, you're most cold, you're most ready to leave, you're most injured, you're not going to be playing as well as you are going to be playing in week 1 of the regular season. You're just not going to be. Everybody's beaten down. Everybody's worn down by that point. You are a worse player at the end of the season than you are at the beginning of the season. It's just a fact. But the hope is that you've built enough of a foundation to the point where your foundation is better than the other guys. And so if your foundation is better, then your baseline is better and you're playing better football. So just a small thing, but And of course, we're talking in abstracts. That's all we can do at this point, because we don't know what these coaches are really going to do. And they can get up there and use all the platitudes possible. We don't really know how it's going to come down to things. And as Declan Doyle said, he's not going to play a single snap this year. He's going to sit back and watch things from the sideline. It's going to come down to the players themselves.
Yeah. And Weaver mentioned that, there's obviously disappointment for him, and we'll touch on some more takeaways from him in a little bit, but he felt like coming to Baltimore, even in a non-play calling capacity, was still a big deal, because he feels like being the Ravens defensive coordinator is the preeminent defensive coordinator job in the NFL. And I think for him, the challenge or the charge that he's taking on in year 1 in Baltimore is imparting that same level of scale and scope and importance to the guys on that defense, whether you're as highly paid as Kyle Hamilton or as low on the depth chart as Keandre Jackson, like making them feel like being a part of a Ravens defense and putting in the work that is commensurate with the level of lore that is associated with this franchise and with this defense in particular is important work and not just something that you can take lightly.
Keandre Jackson flew into Baltimore for the press conference, correct?
Yep.
Pretty cool.
Big brownie points for CoCap.
Yeah, he's trying to make the team any way he can.
Or maybe he's just looking to rack up like Marriott points.
Yeah, maybe that too. Southwest credit points. Let's start on Anthony Weaver, because we're there, and we'll talk about Declan Doyle and Anthony Levine in a second. But you mentioned the opportunities that Anthony Weaver hasn't gotten. He is open about the fact that he's a little bummed that he didn't get a head coaching job. He interviewed for many head coaching jobs this cycle. He's done it in previous head coaching cycles, and it's understandable. He has yet to get to land one of those jobs, despite the fact that it seems like every team wants to talk to him during the offseason. But he said, this is hardly a consolation prize. Sure, this is a step back. I mean, he's going from defensive coordinator in Miami, where he was in control of the defense and could call plays, to defensive coordinator where he's not in control of the plays, and Jesse Minter is going to be calling the plays on Sundays. But he said he thought about what he wants to do, what his purpose is. And he said, I'm here to serve players. I don't need to be a head coach in order to do that. I thought that was kind of an egoless response. It is certainly one that, he has to accept, because seems like the best opportunity for him. But he also said being the defensive coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens is like being the main defensive coordinator in the NFL. It's a high profile job. it's an important job because it's, one that comes with a lot of history and pressure. And interestingly, in kind of a flip side of things, you look at Declan Doyle, I think you could say very similar things about the offensive coordinator role, not because of the history of the offensive coordinators that come through Baltimore or the history of the Ravens offense, but because you kind of get the best of both worlds if you're Declan Doyle. You get to coach immensely talented players and maybe the most talented player in the NFL in Lamar Jackson, but you also have a defensive-minded head coach. So you're coming from a system in Chicago where you were, the right-hand man to Ben Johnson. You weren't calling plays, to now you get to call plays as well. So you're going to be certainly a top prize in terms of head coaching interviews if this season goes well.
Yeah, I forget if it was Declan saying this about Jesse or vice versa, but basically that throughout this coaching process, Jesse was looking for a coordinator who reminded him of himself on the offensive side of the ball. So I think you have that twinning of minds, and obviously Weaver brings that credibility and that connection to the franchise along with CoCap. So I think you just have a lot of not backup plans. You have a lot of DNA and a lot of franchise spine in this, considering all of the kind of safeguards that you have in place on the offensive side of the ball with Lombardi and Brady. And then on defense, you have Jesse Minter as the play caller, but Anthony Weaver being the guy to lead the meeting. And I think that was honestly just kind of one of the watchwords for me coming out of this, getting up and leading a meeting, because Declan Doyle, Ben Johnson was the play caller. Ben Johnson was the head coach in Chicago, but he couldn't be there in every meeting. So it was Declan Doyle at age 28, standing up there in front of a group of guys who had not been accustomed to winning and getting them in position to succeed, that they could be the better team every Sunday. And I think the fact that he has that experience now under his belt probably bodes well for his opportunity to actually go out there as a play caller on Sundays and do it himself. Anthony Weaver, obviously, coming from Baltimore, being a defensive coordinator in Miami, he has stood up, led defenses, not very good defenses in the Dolphins case, but he has that experience of being able to command a room, and he has
first year was pretty good, by the way, in Miami.
Yeah. And in Baltimore, he has guys who he's worked with who can vouch for him. Travis Jones, Nabi Madubuike, if he's there, Travis Robinson. And he mentioned that Calais Campbell reached out to him after he got the job. Obviously, Calais is in Baltimore yet, but it kind of goes to show what he has there. And then CoCap, just, Chris Horton empowered him over the years too, to be there in the special teams room, stand up, lead the meetings, and prepare him for the opportunity to one day have his own special teams unit to lead. So obviously, I think it probably would have been preferable just, for the sake of 2026, if Chris Horton had stayed here, because I think he is one of the better special teams coordinators in the NFL. We don't know what CoCap could be. He could be even better, or he could be a lot worse. That's just how these kind of things work. But the fact that none of these guys are really stepping into shoes that are too big. We still have questions about Declan Doyle and his play calling ability. We still have questions about how Anthony can lead a special teams unit himself. But the fact that they have done the day-to-day stuff that you don't see unless you're watching a Hard Knocks episode, I think is very important, because all we see is 3 hours on Sunday, but what goes on in the off season and what goes on the regular season from the 9 to 5 and in some cases from 8 to 8 is a lot more important.
Yeah, let's talk about Anthony Levine Sr., 38-year-old who was promoted to special teams coordinator. We haven't had a chance to discuss it since the news came down. Nickname CoCap. As an NFL player, went undrafted in 2010, spent the first 2 years on the Green Bay Packers practice squad, signed with the Ravens practice squad in 2012, had a 10-year career as an ace special teamer. Assistant special teams coach with the Tennessee Titans from 2023, 2024, and then last year, special teams coach under Chris Horton. Jonas, what were your first, what have your interactions been like, I should say, with Anthony Levine Sr., and what kind of reputation does he have in that Ravens building? Yeah,
I talked to him for a while in, 2019, maybe, just kind of early in the Lamar era, early in my beat era, when he was a member of the quote unquote leadership council, which was a group of primarily defensive guys. I think Matthew Judon was on there. Marlon Humphrey was on there. Eric Weddle, when he was still in Baltimore, was on there. Just guys who would get in their 2-a-day or twice a week weightlifting sessions very early in the morning, and they had it set up so that like if you were even a minute late to like a 5:30 or 6 o'clock weightlifting session, you would not be allowed to lift with them. So
this is like Marlon Humphrey last year. Talking about this
right.
Year.
That is something that has endured over the years as guys have come and gone. So he obviously offers a connection to that kind of era. You just think of how important he has been to Ravens special teams. Chris Horton said back after CoCap retired that when he took over as special teams coordinator in 2019, Anthony was the first player he brought to his office. So I think the fact that like he is, he has that relationship with a lot of guys on the 2020-16 because he was there for 2025, I think is important. I think you have someone like that who can be a liaison, maybe a go-between in some of those rocky moments in the offseason if need be. And, he's just the real deal as a person. I mean, he has kind of come from nothing, undrafted at Tennessee State, didn't play for, I think the Packers the first couple of years, lands in Baltimore, wasn't on the Super Bowl roster that, he was on the Ravens, but he wasn't on the like active roster that listed that Lombardi trophy. But he has been a part of so many great Ravens special teams units over the years and has just so much credibility in that front office or in that locker room because of what he turned himself into. Eric DeCosta called him a forever Raven when he retired. So TBD on just how he'll be able to manage this group leading his own. But the fact that he's got Randy Brown to hopefully smooth things over with Tyler Loop in this first go around. I think the expectation is that you have an all-pro punter in Jordan Stout coming back, and then to bring in Ben Kotwika. I just don't know if we're pronouncing that correctly, but a guy who's been a very good special teams coordinator over the years at a lot of different spots. I mean, like the only reason that Denver fired him a couple of years ago was because of that terrible breakdown that led to the field goal block against the Chiefs, if you remember, kind of late in the season. I think there was one other thing. Oh yeah, it was him not realizing that if the Chargers fair caught a punt at the end of the first half, that they could try a spot kick, which led to that incredible play in prime time. So yeah. I think Sean Payton was not very happy with that, but overall that was a very good Broncos special teams unit by DVOA. So again, another example of just having this kind of firewall in place, even if CoCap has to kind of find himself year one on the job.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about Declan Doyle now. When asked what kind of offense he wants to have, physical, detailed, explosive. Bring me all the platitudes, Jonas. Word of the day, platitude. 29 years old, as mentioned. The first questions he's going to get are going to be about his age.
The first question he got was about Lamar Jackson.
It was about Lamar Jackson. Yeah. That's why I said first questions, okay. Some of the first questions. He talked about his experience. This is his 8th year in the NFL. It's his 11th year coaching overall, despite being so young. And he said he's been the youngest guy in like every room he's been in and he's coached in. But if you know ball, if you have the player's best interest at heart, he said players know that and they'll listen. Knowledge is power, and he feels like he has enough knowledge to do this. The most important conversations, of course, revolve around Lamar Jackson and how that is going to work out. He said he had over an hour-long Zoom call with Lamar Jackson. There are the questions about how he wants Lamar Jackson to handle the position. How much in structure versus out of structure he wants Lamar to have. And he said with Lamar, the defense has to defend 2 plays. The play that is called and the second play, which is Lamar Jackson scrambling and doing crazy things out of structure. He also talked about how, as any kind of quarterback, whether it be Caleb Williams or Lamar Jackson or somebody else, the quarterback is the eraser, that he can make up for mistakes by other guys. He can make up for anything else by putting on the cape and being Superman, and that he would he expects Lamar Jackson to do that at some point. But what he would like is for Lamar Jackson to be more consistent with the first play, with the play that is called. And that's something that he's going to focus on especially. Jonas, do you think that's the right approach when it comes to Lamar Jackson?
Yeah, and I think that is the unsexy but most important aspects of this offseason that we're all going to kind of monitor. I think, T. Martin never really came out and said it outright, but when you look back at some of his quotes from, I think, mandatory minicamp last year about just what Lamar was trying to do and how he was trying to maybe become more in lockstep with what the best, processors of the game do. It was just, seeing the game through a more conventional lens. And obviously the balancing act that you have to play here is, do you want Lamar to play more robotically? If that means that you are risking him losing some of that improvisational ability, like, do you want him to go 1 to 2 to 3 in his reads, knowing that maybe he's more comfortable being a little less straightforward, a little less dogmatic in that kind of approach? So that's going to be, I think, something that is probably going to be, I don't want to say a source of tension, but just something to watch this offseason in OTAs, in mandatory minicamp, in training camp. Like, how quickly does Lamar see the game the way that Declan Doyle wants him to see the game? And the fact that there's a fresh start is promising, but this just can go a lot of ways.
Right. Like, do you think Greg Roman and Todd Monken also tried very hard to have Lamar Jackson do that?
Yeah. I mean, like,
to play in structure?
I think everyone wants to play. You can't live a productive life.
No.
Like, as Declan Doyle kind of joked, like, we're not going to call scramble. But Todd Monken said last year or the year before, like, the play call that we'll call the most without ever calling it is scramble. And I think you just want to reduce the burden on Lamar by having everything be synced up a little bit more harmoniously. And again, this is not just a Lamar problem if his offensive line doesn't block for him the way that it should, if his receivers don't hit their landmarks the way that they should, if his running backs don't hit the holes on early downs when they get the ball to help set up some of these advantageous second and third down looks, then Lamar can only take so much of the blame. But this is going to be a fascinating transitional period for him, because it's a new head coach, it's a new offensive coordinator, it's a new quarterbacks coach as well, and we're just not really sure how it's going to look. I think because it's Lamar, we have a pretty safe expectation that the floor can only be so low, especially with what this offensive line could be if they re-sign Tyler Linderbaum and draft some help or sign some help. But there could be some challenging days ahead, and the fact that Declan Doyle was willing to say something as specific as he needs to work on his eyes, he needs to work on his footwork, was to me like an indication that he will not be cowed in maybe some of the ways that other coordinators have been.
Right. And I bring up Roman and Monken because both those guys, I think, as you said, had the same intention. Those guys wanted Lamar Jackson to run the play that was called, to have more in structure success. And that doesn't mean they weren't successful in various ways. I mean, Todd Monken coaxed an MVP and maybe 2 MVP seasons out of Lamar Jackson and got him to break all kinds of records. But, they were only so successful at getting Lamar to be that kind of see open receiver, see the play, hit the play, throw the ball when you should throw the ball. And so there's a difference between saying you want that to happen and actually making it happen.
Yeah. And it's not just being comfortable with what the reads should be on again, like, one thing that we probably will ask Declan Doyle is just what kind of system this is for a quarterback. Like, is it a pure progression system?
Right.
Or is it a full field read? Like, those are the two different, schools of thought. Some people like one, other people like another. Maybe there's a happy medium for Lamar, but we'll see. I think, again, like I said, it's not just about being able to do the reads and seeing the game that your offensive coordinator wants you to see. It's also just, feeling comfortable with the kinds of throws that you need to be to take advantage of what the defense gives you. Like, obviously this cannot be laid at Lamar's feet. He hasn't really had a Jamar Chase level possession receiver. We thought that DeAndre Hopkins might be that, but there was not those kinds of returns on that investment. But like, if the Ravens want to be explosive and they want to run the ball well, then they're going to get their opportunities on, single high defenses. And what do you do with single high defenses? Well, you kind of punish them toward the sideline. And Lamar has just not really been all that willing to throw the kind of prototypical Joe Burrow go ball, especially the back shoulder throw, and punish coordinators punish cornerbacks in single coverage. Will he be given someone in the first round of the draft or the second round of the draft who could do that more easily than Zay Flowers or Rashad Bateman if Rashad Bateman is still on this team in 2026? We'll see. But, there are so many things that Caleb Williams can do that Lamar, I think, is still trying to get there. But there's also so much more that Lamar Jackson can do that Caleb Williams can't.
Yes, a lot more.
And so it is just a process of what exactly is it that Declan Doyle did in Chicago that is repeatable here in Baltimore.
Right. In terms of Lamar Jackson's participation in off-season voluntary programs, Declan Doyle did say, we would expect him to be here.
To be fair, this wasn't just about him. This was because I didn't want to be in anyone's crosshair. So I asked about
the question.
General player participation.
Yeah.
But obviously, the most scrutinized person in offseason workouts, as is every year, will be Lamar Jackson.
Doyle said, it is voluntary, but if you want to win a championship, you have to start the collaboration early, especially when it comes to a new coaching staff. He said that would be those guys getting in here, getting this thing going so we can hit the ground running when it comes to training camp. Lamar Jackson has, in the past, shown up for voluntary offseason programs. I think last year, though, he showed up for the first day, first couple days, and then dipped.
Well, yeah, I mean, we don't get eyes on all the OTAs, so we can only make judgments based on the practices that are open to the media. But Lamar, the past 2 years, because of the contract that he signed in 2023, as has been talked about over and over again, had $750,000 bonuses in both those years if he attended at least 80% of those practices. And it is the belief of everyone in NFL media that he did not earn that $1.5 million total because he was not there for the majority of the practices. And, he doesn't really make a big deal of it. He kind of shrugs it off. He misdirects, when he's asked about that kind of stuff. But, I think it was intentional on John Harbaugh's behalf last year that he opened up all of those OTAs to the media to maybe put a little bit of pressure on Lamar, because if the media is going to be out here every day, then they're going to be taking attendance every day. And if Lamar's not here, then, maybe he wanted the world to know.
Yeah.
So who knows what exactly the Ravens plan is going to be for media access, but certainly, as Declan Doyle said, and I think Jesse Minter would probably echo, because they're starting over on defense, they're starting over on offense. You could say they're even starting over on special teams. Like, it's going to require all 90 players on that defense to show up. And, it wasn't just Lamar, no showing last year. Nnamdi Madubuike missed a couple of OTAs. Kyle Hamilton missed a couple of OTAs. So I think it's probably safe to say that if the Ravens don't get close to 100% participation, don't get close to 100% attendance this year in these OTAs, then it'll be a big, big disappointment.
Yeah, something to watch for sure. Jonas, after this press conference, what were some of the unanswered questions that you had for this new coaching staff?
I think we kind of ran out of time, but I am just curious what exactly the level of investment Jesse Minter and, to a lesser degree, CoCap will want for the special teams unit. Like, will it be the same kind of division of time in practice that we saw in Baltimore, where you're sending, a half hour to open things up, just working on working on your reps as a punt return team, kick return team? Do the kickers have the same freedom to go to the stadium and kick when they need to? There's a lot to work on this offseason, but there's only so many hours in the day. There's only so many days of training camp. So how interested is Jesse Minter in having this special teams be an elite group? Because we've seen a lot of great coaches around the NFL not really have great results in special teams. And I don't know if that's because they're drafting the wrong players and signing the wrong players, or because they're hiring the wrong coaches, or because they're just not putting in the sweat equity that you need to take a 30th ranked special teams unit to a third ranked special teams unit. Kyle Shanahan has flopped. Matt LaFleur has flopped. Sean McVay has flopped. Even John Harbaugh flopped, in 2024 before bouncing back a little this past year. But just how much of a paradigm shift, if any, will there be when it comes to Ravens special teams?
So special teams for me is always weird because you're obviously getting, to put it bluntly, the scraps of the roster. You're getting the guys that are on the periphery of the roster to play. Right. And a lot of those guys are either there for special teams or they are backups for other positions. And so special teams is secondary for them. The weirdness about special teams for me too is that there are so many different things that special teams do. There's punt return.
5 phases.
Yeah, 5 phases. There's punt return, kick return, punting, kicking,
field goals.
So there are just so many different things. So like one area of special teams can be great and the others are terrible, or vice versa. And then the number of plays that they're on the field for is significantly less than offensive defense. So you're talking about a much smaller sample size when it comes to that. And then you get weird things like, the incorrect penalty that was thrown last year in the first game against the Steelers, I believe, where Travis Jones jumps across the line, but it doesn't actually impact the center, and the flag is thrown and they get a first down and touchdown. It's like, that's going to massively change how you view special teams in that game, but it was incorrect. So special teams is such a weird thing for me. And I have, if defense is not sticky year to year, I feel even less confident in special teams sticking year to year because of all that.
Another unanswered question for me is Declan Doyle talked about how they are basically ripping this offense down to the studs, and they are in the process now of reinventing it. I think when Greg Roman took over as offensive coordinator before that 2019 season, he used similar technology or terminology. I think he described it as like a kind of soup to nuts remake. I forget. And then when you compare that maybe to Todd Monken when he took over in 2023, was maybe a little bit more generous toward what Greg Roman had built, and said that they would basically build on top of what the Ravens did, especially in the run game. I think the overhaul of the passing game was far more comprehensive. But I do wonder just how new everything will be for this offense, because even with Greg Roman, like a lot of that 2018 offensive success were his run concepts. Like it was Marty Morningweg's offense technically, but a lot of what was powering that offense on the ground was stuff that he'd brought with him, from what he'd done so successfully over the years, thinking back to San Francisco. When Todd Monken comes in, again, it is building on the Greg Roman run game, marrying that with the passing game. But now I just wonder, is it going to be the same kind of approach, or is it going to be just completely divorced from what has worked in the past? Like they said that obviously they're going to build this offense around the personnel that they have, and there are only so many plays out there. There are only so many run concepts, only so many
dunks.
Yeah, only so many passing concepts that you can throw out there into a playbook. But I just wonder, like, will this be more of an actual evolution for what this offense was in 2025, or will it look like an offense made of whole cloth when these guys are coming in for these installs in May, June, July?
When was the last time you ended a meal with nuts?
I've had as like a dessert, some honey, some sugary nuts.
Have you?
Yeah, just like you can get some nice spicy sweet nuts from, I think, Trader Joe's that work really well.
Did that meal also begin with soup?
No, I haven't had soup in. I mean, I'm rarely sick, so I don't really like making soup for myself. I'm more of a stew kind of guy.
Okay, it's hearty.
Yes,
it's
protein packed.
Weather. Sure.
Yeah.
If I'm having something at the end of the meal, it's got to be a dessert.
Yeah.
Sweet nuts doesn't really do it for me. Do you have any
on a t-shirt?
Do you have any more unanswered questions before we move on?
No, I think we're good.
Okay.
Nothing really comes to mind with Anthony Weaver. He talked about just his obligation to lead this defense in moments when Jesse Minter isn't in the meeting rooms. Just he's, like you said, he's there to serve. He's there to make life easier for Jesse Minter on game day. So it's gonna be interesting to see just how what his impact is on this defense and what his impact is on the defensive staff. I think we probably should have mentioned that when he was shouting out guys.
Yeah.
You noticed, and I noticed too, that among the omissions from guys he considered top performers on that back end was none other than Marlon Humphrey.
Yeah, didn't mention him. It
could have just been a honest oversight. It could have been a reflection of the fact that he didn't play very well last year, and so why try to put lipstick on that pig? But he thinks that there are winners up front in the pass rush. He acknowledged the Nnamdi Madubuike situation without going into any more detail about whether he expected him back for next year. But he's optimistic about what this defense can be, and I think that's the right approach to take, because there are still a lot of blue chip talents that are going to make up the big timers on this unit.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's what we learned from the Ravens introductory press conferences for their coordinators. You wrote a story on thebanner.com where people can subscribe $1 for 6 months about the Ravens' own pending free agents. And we are going to have a podcast about this soon, probably next week. So I don't want to get too much into it. A lot of interesting names on that list. It's not like the class after the 2023 season where all these guys were, Patrick Queen and Jadeveon Clowney and all those guys were hitting free agency, but some bigger names hitting free agency. And it starts, of course, with Tyler Linderbaum. To me, I see the Ravens handling this similarly to the way they handled Nnamdi Madubuike's free agency, which is they are trying their darndest to get an extension done. And it's not based on any reporting. That's just based on what they've said. I mean, they would like to have him in-house. If it gets close to the start of free agency in a few weeks, they have in their back pocket the franchise tag that they can use on him to extend the window during which they can negotiate with him. But given the state of the offensive line, given Tyler Linderbaum's importance to that offensive line, given Tyler Linderbaum's stellar play, Tyler Linderbaum has to be first and foremost on their list of their own pending free agents.
Yeah, I think you take Eric DeCosta at his word, and a lot of what Eric DeCosta promises to do, Eric DeCosta delivers on. And this is 10 months ago at this point, but when the Ravens declined that fifth-year option last year, as they should have, because paying, a lot $23.4 million for that 2026 price tag would have been way too much, considering no one makes more than Creed Humphrey at $18 million per year. But he said the team intended for Tyler Linderbaum, quote, to remain a Raven long-term. And I don't think anything that we saw in 2025, even if you have misgivings about his pass protection, would have changed that calculus. Like, the Ravens knew that re-signing Tyler Linderbaum would have cost a lot because he was a Pro Bowler each of the previous 2 years, and he was a Pro Bowler this year. And the salary cap jumps at a pretty steady, reliable rate each year. So I think they had an idea of what it would take to re-sign Tyler Linderbaum here. I guess my big question is, does Tyler Linderbaum take matters into his own hands in the same way that Ronnie Stanley did, where Ronnie Stanley could have made it to free agency? He could have made a lot more money than he did by re-signing with the Ravens, but he wanted to be here in Baltimore. He wanted to be back with Lamar, wanted to be here with Todd Monken and everyone that he knew from the coaching staff. And he said, you know what, it's worth it for me to take a little bit of a haircut, right, because I really enjoy being a Raven. And Tyler Linderbaum said everything that you expected him to say, when we had our locker room clean out, I guess a month ago at this point. Like, he wanted to remain a Raven. He has a lot of love for Lamar and guys in this locker room, even though there could be pretty widespread attrition this year in certain corners of that offensive line. So I think for me, I'm still optimistic that they'll be able to get a deal done, but we don't know the kind of invisible strings here at work. Yeah,
for sure. Also on that list of the Ravens pending free agents, Keaton Mitchell's a restricted free agent, Patrick Ricard, Jordan Stout, Draymond Jones, Isaiah Likely, Alohi Gilman, a lot of guys on that list, and we'll get more into it next week. But Jonas, somebody just hit the free agent market in the past couple of weeks. One Bradley Chubb, pass rusher for the Miami Dolphins. He was released. He's 29 years old, coming off a season which he had 8.5 sacks, coming back from a torn ACL. This is a guy who, anytime somebody is released, that doesn't affect a comp pick formula. We know how much Eric DeCosta loves his comp picks. Are you jumping to sign Bradley Chubb if you're the Ravens?
I guess ask me again after you show me the medicals, because
played in all 17 last year.
Yeah, but just wasn't as productive on a per snap basis as he had been.
Would have led the Ravens in sacks by a lot.
It has that familiarity with Anthony Weaver, which matters. I think he's a pretty reliable run defender, which definitely matters in this Jesse Minter system. But being a guy with a knee injury who will soon be on the wrong side of 30, you definitely have to be a little bit apprehensive. I mean, I think I would probably rather have Draymond Jones than Bradley Chubb based on everything.
Really?
He would think he was more productive on a pressure rate basis, and he doesn't really have the wear and tear that Bradley Chubb does. But I haven't looked in to see what the new market for Bradley Chubb might be in terms of this is what you're going to have to pay this guy.
Interesting. I think it's going to be interesting to see if the Ravens change their stripes in terms of free agency, because of what Eric Costa has said, that they seem to be more willing to spend in free agency. But premier pass rushers, even good pass rushers, don't hit the market that often. If you look beyond Bradley Chubb and Draymond Jones, it's not a great group of pass rushers, unless you want to bring back Odafe Oweh. It's really a thin group there. So, if you're going to go get a pass rusher, which this team needs, you're either going to have to take him high in the draft, or you're probably going to have to trade for him, or you're just going to have to go ahead and bite the bullet and sign Bradley Chubb or Draymond Jones.
PFF grades aren't the end all be all, but we'll end on this: 78th out of 115 edge rushers last year for Bradley Chubb.
Maybe an extra year after the surgery, though. You never know. All right. At Jonas_Shaffer is his handle. I'm at Paul Mancano and at Old Banner Sports. Like, rate, review, subscribe. If you write us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, I will read it out here on the show. I got to get the clip ready. There it is. Shout out to the Baltimore Banner, as Carmelo Anthony would say. Thanks so much for tuning in. For Jonas Shaffer, I'm Paul Mancano. We'll have another episode for you next week. I think early next week, potentially, about I'm thinking about we rank the Ravens pending free agents in terms of likelihood that they return to Baltimore. How does that sound, Jonas?
Sounds good. It's going to be a busy week next week with
Combine.
So many, as other members of the Ravens media reminded me, there is going to be so much of a Ravens presence. Guys talking, Todd Monken, John Harbaugh, guys who are connected to Declan Doyle. We think of Sean Payton, Ben Johnson. There's going to be a lot of work to do.
Yeah. You're already looking forward to it, I can tell.
Love it.
Thanks so much for tuning in. For Jonas Shaffer,